Welcome to the Hope-Filled Romantic, where faith and fiction meet real-life love stories. I'm your host, Heather Tabers, and each week we'll sit down with Christian romance authors to talk about the swoon-worthy relationships in their books, and the sometimes messy, always meaningful love stories in real life. This girl believes that every love story, real or fictional, begins with hope. So cue the heart flutters. The next chapter begins now. Sarah Sundin is an ECPA, best-selling, and Christie Award-winning author of World War II fiction, including Midnight on the Scottish Shore, Embers in the London Sky, The Sound of Light, Until Leaves Fall in Paris, and When Twilight Breaks. Her novel, Until Leaves Fall in Paris, received the 2022 Christie Award. And The Sound of Light, When Twilight Breaks, and The Land Beneath Us were finalists for the Christie Award. Her novels have received star reviews from Published Weekly, Booklist, and Library Journal. A mother of 3 adult children, Sarah lives in Southern California and teaches Sunday school and women's Bible studies. She enjoys speaking to community, church, and writers groups as well. Sarah, thank you so much for being with me this morning.
Thank you for having me on your show, Heather.
Of course, I'm so excited. I've talked with you in the past and we've done some collaborations, but today we get to talk about Midnight on the Scottish Shore, which I am sad to say is still in my TBR pile because it's growing out of control. But I've read so many of your books and I'm really excited about this one.
Thank you.
So, Midnight on the Scottish Shore drops readers into a pretty unique situation with a Dutch woman spying for the Nazis who turns double agent. So, what inspired Scylla's character and her storyline?
Well, actually, it came from mythology. So I wanted to set a story in Scotland and during World War II. And the story in Scotland in World War II is quieter, not as many people know about it. But I really wanted to set one in Scotland. And so my youngest son, who really loves mythology, said, "Hey, Mom, you should use some of the Scottish myths." So I said, "Well, tell me one." So he told me the story of the Selkie. And the Selkie looks like a seal in the ocean. And then when she comes ashore, she removes her sealskin and she's this ravishing young woman. And men who see her can't help but fall in love. But to trap the Selkie on the land, he has to hide her sealskin. And if she ever finds her sealskin, she'll float away and go back to the sea. So that was, and I was immediately seeing in my mind's eye this woman arriving by rubber boat, which is how so when the Germans would drop off spies in Britain, they either parachuted in or they had a U-boat or another boat bring it close to shore, and then they paddled a rubber boat to shore. So okay. I was like, she's coming ashore on a rubber boat, and she lands, and my kilt-wearing Scottish hero sees her, and so he traps her by stealing her sealskin, in this case her boat, so she can't escape. But really what he's doing, he is a naval officer, so he is all about duty and honor, and the only thing he can do is to turn her in, knowing that he believes she's a German spy. He doesn't believe her silly story that, no, I'm really with the resistance. I just fooled the Germans so I could get a free ride to England. He doesn't believe it. Sounds like nonsense. Of course it does. And it does sound like nonsense, except that it is the truth. So he turns her in, knowing that she'll be executed. But Britain's MI5, when they capture spies, their first goal is to turn them to become double agents. And they did. They turned about 3 dozen of the spies who landed in England, and they became double agents. So they worked for Britain, sent false messages or misleading messages back to Germany to fool them. And it worked. Germany never figured out that any of their agents were turned, which is phenomenal. Wow. They did a great job. So, and of course, because Scylla really is on the Allied side, when she's offered that choice, she's like, absolutely, I'll take it. But they sent her back up to Scotland so that, because her assignment from Germany was to spy on naval shipping from Scapa Flow, which is from the Orkney Islands, which is right above the tip of mainland Scotland. And so they put her in a lighthouse at the very tip of northern Scotland. And they give her a naval officer liaison from Scapa Flow, who is none other than Lachlan Mackenzie, the same man who captured her. So that was my setup. It was a
Wow.
fun one to
So
write.
we have kilt-wearing Scottish naval officers. We have lighthouses. I mean, does it get any more swoon-worthy than that?
It was such fun once I combined those elements. Like, oh, this is going to be a great story to write, and it was. It was so fun to write, and I'm getting really good feedback from readers. They're really enjoying it. So
Well, I love hearing the excitement in your voice just as you talk about the story. So I know it's filled with passion and excitement and adventure. So I really you're making me even more excited to read it now. But I have to ask, how did you approach building trust and romantic tension between these two people who start off as enemies, even though they're not enemies, but he thinks they're enemies?
and at the beginning, they are. So he sees her as an enemy. She's a German spy come to his shores. Um, he assumes that she's there to wreak havoc, and
Right.
so yeah, he doesn't trust her one bit. And she doesn't like him because he's the one who captured her and turned her in to be executed, so without
Of
any
course.
mercy. And so she doesn't think much of him, and she's very um, playful and fun loving and humorous. And here is this very by the book um, he comes across very humorless, and she just thinks he's annoying, and and then they're forced to work together. And so there's the so how I was able to build that romance was that the forced proximity. There's no way these two would associate with each other. Absolutely not. They both hate each other at the beginning. She just loves, but at the beginning she's like, well, I have to work with this guy, so I'm going to tease him. I'm going to tease him because he doesn't like to be teased. So she just pounds him with the teasing, and so she has fun at his expense. But where it starts to grow is that he starts to see her true heart, and that she comes across kind of a flibberty gibbet, but she's really on the Allied side. It takes him a long time to really accept that she is who she says she is. Um, and she comes to see that his rigidity comes from that sense of duty and honor, which she actually does admire. So they start to admire each other's character long before they really trust each other. So, they, they start to accept each other and then slowly
Yeah.
trust each other and like each other. And then that grows into love as they both really, and they change so much during the story too. They feed off of each other and change each other. And so he becomes less rigid. She accepts that there are rules have a reason. And so, so they both grow. And through that, they really find love for each other. But at that point, then it's forbidden. He is a naval officer. He has a duty to the crown. And here
Right.
is a woman who is officially a double agent, officially a Nazi spy in, Britain's logbook, if you will.
Right.
Romance is not allowed, so they have to. At that point, it becomes, forbidden love. Neither of them declare it until quite a ways. I won't tell you where, but
Well, I would say in any especially any wow, any enemies to lovers story, the stakes are high. It's going to be hard to learn to trust. But in this case, the stakes are very high because we're talking about national security. We're talking about the lives of countless individuals. So the stakes are so much higher, the tension is so much higher. And this idea of duty and honor, like you said, just makes it so much more interesting for them to have to maneuver through that. And I think about this idea of freedom, personal freedom, political freedom, spiritual freedom. It shows up in powerful ways. So, what do you think true freedom really means to your characters, and why did you want to explore that with them?
it was fun. It wasn't the original theme for this, and I found theme often emerges as I'm writing the story,
Yes.
and I realized that they both had very different views of freedom. And I think that most of us, when I start describing it, people are like, oh yeah, that's me, and or the other one's me. So For Scylla, freedom means no rules, no restrictions. Nobody tells me what I can do. I can do what I want when I want. That is the definition of freedom. And for most people, and I mean, that's kind of in our Constitution. That's what freedom is.
Right.
Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm an American. So,
Yes.
and that's, I mean, that's kind of ingrained in our culture. It's like no limits. Let me do what I want to do. So for Scylla, that is what freedom means. Now she has found herself literally confined in a physical space, in a social space. Here's an extrovert confined with very few people who don't even like her. She's just dying,
I'm
and
sure.
she feels like she calls herself Rapunzel in the tower, like, come save me.
Aw.
So, I mean, this is like the worst situation she could possibly imagine. It was a beautiful setting, absolutely beautiful setting, but she's confined, and she hates it. So she has to find, which her cousin calls it, freedom in the trap. And she's like, you're crazy. How can you find freedom inside a trap? So here she is in a trap, and she has to find freedom. Now, for Lachlan, it's the opposite. He has always found freedom in security. When the rules are in
Mm,
place, when the walls are up, then he can have freedom in security. It's like now he can relax, everything's safe. Now I am free. In the story, a lot of his walls get kicked down or are threatened. And where's his freedom then? Is he
mm,
free? So for him, trying to find where is that source of true freedom, and both of them come to realize that true freedom is only in Christ. So, and that is, you know, in freedom, you know, if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. And all
yes.
throughout history, um, Christians in prison are free, and
Mm,
you know,
love that.
Christians being executed are free. Christians with no political rights at all are free. And that's where they find that freedom. It's like, I am free in Christ. So I have peace, I have joy, I have true freedom. And that freedom is not to do what I want to do. It's also not to make others do what we want them to do. That freedom is to be who Christ wants us to be and to let Him transform our hearts so we can share His word. So it's a very different sort of freedom than what the
Yes.
world thinks it is on both sides. And I think we can each identify people like, oh yeah, that person's a walls freedom. They like their walls, and that person like no walls freedom. So,
Yes.
but you know, the walls or lack of walls isn't where our freedom is. Our freedom is in Christ, and then we have freedom whether or not there are walls in place to protect us or to restrict us. We still have that freedom, um, and Scylla just finds that just there she is trapped, and suddenly she's like, I'm free. And it doesn't,
Mm,
and that frees her to do what she knows is right and hard. There's a decision she has to make at the end, which is extremely hard. um, a decision she would have not made early in the book, but at the end she's like, I can do this, I can take that choice, um, because I'll be free wherever I am. And
mm.
so that was a kind of a it was a different theme to explore, and but as I said, it kind of rose from the story itself.
Yeah, I think only another Christian, especially a Christian who's experienced feeling trapped or feeling that they are not free and then has learned where their true freedom comes from. Only another Christian would be able to identify with that character. Because from the outside, from the world's perspective, we're absolutely crazy. These Christians who are persecuted and imprisoned for their faith, they look at these Christians like they're absolutely out of their minds to have joy and peace and to feel that freedom while they're being held captive. But we know
And that
that through
is
Christ, that's the only way we can experience it.
and that is the perennial appeal of Christianity throughout history. It's not people banging people over the head and telling them
Right.
how horrible sinners they are. I've never met a Christian who said, thank you for telling me what a horrible person I am. Now I love Jesus. It's always been the love of Christ that
Absolutely.
draws people to Him. But what they, throughout, the Christians in prison singing for joy that
Yes.
they were counted worthy of being persecuted like Jesus. Um, that people like stunned, and they wanted to know, what do you have? What do you have? And how appealing that is, as opposed to like, oh, you've trampled my rights, which is how we American Christians tend to act when anybody
Yes.
confines us. We're like, oh, I've got my rights, as opposed to, hallelujah, I have been counted worthy of being persecuted like Jesus was. Wow, what an honor. I'm singing, I'm praising God.
Yes.
We don't see that. But if we saw that, think about how beautiful that would be for the world. And that's how we should be. I mean, that's all throughout the New Testament. Blessed are those who are persecuted. Blessed are you who are persecuted.
Yeah.
And, yeah. And the
James,
Beatitudes work their way throughout the story too. So, yeah.
yeah, James tells us to count it all joy when troubles come at us. And we know that verse and we quote that verse. And yet when those trials come, we do not count it all joy, usually until much, much later after we've had time to sit and stew and someone has reminded us of the fact that God has a plan for that pain and that trial. So I think definitely being an American and a Christian, I think because of all of our freedoms and because of what all we've come to expect, and we find ourselves um, to be what's the word?
Oil?
We find that we are owed these certain
Yeah,
inalienable rights.
exactly.
And so
Exactly.
we don't take kindly when someone stands in our way. So I think we all have a long way to go to become like so many of those Christians in third world countries that are sent to prison or executed because of their faith. We have no
Mhm.
idea what it's like to
None.
feel truly face persecution.
No, none.
So in your book, these characters do learn about freedom through Christ, but how else does faith play a role in helping them heal and cope and deal with fear and betrayal and regret?
Yeah. Well, Lachlan especially has some serious trust issues. He was betrayed by his brother, who used to be his best friend, and not just, I mean, big time betrayed, like actively trying to destroy his life, betrayed, and
Oh my
has
goodness.
affected his career. And so he hates his brother. His brother is doing stands for everything Lachlan hates. So here's Lachlan. He is fighting for the Royal Navy. He's wearing the uniform of the Royal Navy. His brother is a Scottish separatist. And
Mm,
there are certain wings of the Scottish separatist movement that, because, the anti English sentiment, they took it to the extreme of we will not fight for England in the English war, even though it was, the whole United Kingdom was part of the war. And not only that, but you know what? Maybe Scotland would be better off under the Germans because the English haven't been so good for us. So maybe the Germans would be better for us. So there are some people who are a small minority of people who are quoted as saying things like that. So Neil Mackenzie, Lachlan's brother, is in that category, and he's just come out of prison, and he was in prison because he refused to sign up for conscription, and so, he stands for everything Lachlan hates and vice versa. So, Neil says, how can you wear an English uniform? You've betrayed your Scottish roots. And, here's a man who's very proud of being Scottish. So there's this, the house divided literally, but it comes down to trust. And Neil doesn't trust Lachlan either. So Neil feels that Lachlan hurt him. And so here are these two brothers who don't trust each other. And Lachlan has to learn how to forgive. How do
mm.
you forgive somebody who shows no remorse? That's a
That's
tough.
so
That's a tough
hard.
one.
So
That's a
hard.
tough one. And so slowly, these two brothers are kind of circling each other, learning how to forgive each other. And I won't tell you if they reconcile at the end or not, but it was um, that sense of trust, like, and mercy. And mercy was huge because
Mm,
Lachlan is he's about duty and honor. And Mercy doesn't really have much of a role in there. Because you do the right thing, and if you don't, well, that's too bad. There's
there are
justice for you. That
consequences. Yep.
there are consequences. So there's no room for mercy because in Lachlan's experience, every time he's shown mercy, he's gotten stepped on and ruined and betrayed. So he doesn't want anything to do with mercy. But obviously, he is a man of faith, and he has to learn that yeah, the Lord holds mercy and justice equally,
Mm,
equally.
yes.
And he doesn't favor one over the other, and neither should we. And that's another hard balance between how when are we too merciful and let people get off away with things they shouldn't get away with, or being so just and there's no sense of mercy and no sense of let's listen and find out what's going on here. So you've got these, and it's a perennial problem we're going to have as human beings. How do you balance those two?
Yes.
And so he has to learn how to get a little bit more mercy into his life. And of course, there's Scylla in his life who is, is all about mercy. So they do learn from each other.
That's wonderful. I love that your stories of World War II are not always just the typical soldier goes off to war, woman is at home waiting, or female is a nurse, and that's the end of that. Just there's simple, typical, not that there's anything wrong with those stories, but you have explored and branched out so much farther and brought so much history to us that personally I have never been familiar with. So I love that you have covered the Dutch and now the Scottish in this war instead of just the Germans and the French and the American. So I don't know how many World War II novels you've written at this point, but what keeps drawing you back to this time period? And are you ever afraid you're going to run out of new ideas?
So yeah, this one is my book number 17, and
Okay.
I keep coming back to World War II because it's an endless source of stories. There's just so much, and there are so many areas that I would love to explore, but they aren't marketable. Like just like there are some incredible stories I would love to get the chance to tell, and my publisher says that's not like I tell that story. So there's always that balance between what the all interesting stories to me and what most people would consider interesting. So, but do I run out of stories, ideas? Yes, and that's how one of the ways that God works with me. I have a lot of writer friends who have so many story ideas that they will never be able to write them all in time. And when it's time to write a new proposal, it's like picking which one shouts the loudest. For me, every time it's time to write a proposal, the last one I came to my editor and agent and I said, I've got nothing, nothing. I have no ideas at all. And I think I had one very vague one. And so we just kind of played with it and like, well, what areas would you like to explore? And I did a little research but God does that, so I come to him hungry. So I'm never
Mm.
proud because I know that he is the source. And yes, he gave me three ideas, and I did get a contract for them, and I'm very excited about those ideas. But at the first, it was like I have nothing, and so. But he does that to me, so I have to come to him and ask politely. So, kind of like the mom holding the carton of milk, and we know our child needs milk. We're going to pour him a cup of milk, but we'll wait till he comes to us and say, please, mommy, may I have some milk? So I feel that that's how God works with me. He's holding the carton of ideas and he's like, are you
Come
ready to say
ask.
please? Thank you.
So I think after 17 novels, I can understand why you might start to struggle with new ideas, but I'm so glad
Oh,
that
I've
God
always
keeps
it's
giving
always
them to
been
you.
no, it's always been that way from the beginning. It's always been three ideas every 3 years.
Wow.
Sometimes I get, sometimes I know those three ideas a little bit earlier in advance, but it's sometimes it's like this. The ones I'm working on right now, I had idea for this book, The Midnight on the Scottish Shore. The Embers in the London Sky, I had an idea for the heroine's story, but I didn't know where to set it. I didn't know who he was. And then the third book, I also had nothing. And it's like, well, where do I want to do it? And ended up choosing the Channel Islands because I'd always wanted to set a story in the Channel Islands. And then like, okay, what stories? I don't want it to be too Guernsey Literary Society, potato peel. And
You're
so I want to
right.
make sure that mine was different. And it's one that I don't think has been explored in the Christian market. So it gave me a little freedom, but I wanted to bring out some new concepts. So I started looking into that, like, well, what's there? And reading a little bit and going, oh, that's interesting. And oh, I could do that. And looking for something. I'm always looking for something just a little different than
Mhm.
everyone else is doing, especially since World War II became so popular. At the beginning, there weren't very many of
Yes.
us writing it, and I was kind of free to write whatever I was interested in. Now I need to be careful. Like, well, everybody's writing this particular type of book. I
Mhm.
want to stay away from that and do something a little different.
Well, you've done a wonderful job. And I love the stories that take you someplace different, that teach you something different. That's not in your eighth grade textbook, not something you saw on Band of Brothers, but something that's a little different. And you've done just such an amazing job at that. So thank you for continuing to go to God and getting His ideas because they have just taken our breath away while we read your books. Shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned to me earlier that both you and your husband were reluctant when you met. So I want to hear a little bit about your own love story. Can you tell us how that began?
We've been married 35 years now, so
Oh,
so
congratulations.
thank you. So yeah, we met in pharmacy school, and I'm a pharmacist. He's a pharmacist, and I gave up pharmacy a couple years ago. He's retired, but he so we met in pharmacy school. He was 2 years ahead of me. I had so I just graduated from UCLA, and I was in a bad relationship, real bad.
Mm.
And so when I had broken up with that loser, a couple weeks before I went to San Francisco for pharmacy school. So I mean, it was fresh, and
Mm,
because it was a bad relationship, I wanted to figure out what had led me. Oh, my head was messed up that I got into that relationship, and
right.
so what did I do wrong to get into that relationship?
Mm,
And because there were warning bells, and I ignored them, and so I kind of want, like, I don't want anything to do with guys for a year, and just let me figure out what's going on and not do anything.
seems
So I
reasonable.
was, yeah, it was a it was a good plan. And then and Dave had also had a good plan because he was starting the third year of pharmacy school, which is the most rigorous year of pharmacy
Mm,
school. That's when the first 2 years are basics, a lot of basic science, some real elementary pharmaceutical principles. But the third year, that's when they get into clinical stuff. So you're talking about the disease states and how to treat them. And it is the meat of, you've been building up to that. Here's the meat. And it's a super intense course, and the fourth year you're going onto the floors and doing rounds, so you need to get it down. And there was a big test at the end of the third year. If you don't pass it, you're not going on rounds, and you have to repeat third year. So it's super stressful year. And he's like, I don't want to date anybody because I want to make sure I'm dedicated to my studies. Also a very good plan.
very good.
So we met at he was orientation director. We met at orientation. And like as I said, both of us no interest in dating. And he was wearing a UCLA t-shirt, and because he'd been to UCLA, and I hadn't met anybody up there from UCLA yet. So I just kind of introduced myself, and he mentioned, oh, by the way, there are a bunch of us that are going to the UCLA Stanford game. And it was a few weeks. Like, yeah, I love UCLA football. Yeah, it'd be great. I'm gonna miss out going on games living in the Bay Area. So he organized this big group of UCLA people to go down to Stanford to watch the game. Well, it fell during midterms, and that group dwindled down to the two of us. And I'm literally on the phone with my friend going, Shelly, you have to come. I don't want to be in the car all. It was gonna be all day. It was like it's an hour and a half drive down there. We have to get there hours in advance. You're at the game all day. It was all day. Like, I don't want to be all day with this one guy.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, and I think during that day there was something I think I was very adamantly talking about my lack of interest in dating. I was like, just so you know, so you don't get
This is not a
any idea.
date.
Oh yeah, and he was kind of doing the same thing. I am my third year. So yeah, and within a month we were dating. It just
Aw.
kind of,
So
so that day we
what changed that
I
made you take that leap forward?
for me, very similar to what still has seen in Lachlan. The integrity. I was just seeing his integrity. And he was a man of faith, a man of quiet faith, and just seeing, when he said he'd do something, he'd do something. And um,
Mm,
there was just, I remember I remember telling a friend of mine that just like there was something solid about him. Not the frou-frou guys that I've been dating, just like they're bouncing around from one thing to another, but Dave knew what he wanted to do. He was on his path. He knew exactly what he wanted to do in life, and he did it. So there was just something very solid about him that I was really drawn to. Also, I'm a procrastinator by nature, and kind of I'm naturally undisciplined, and he is very disciplined. And something about that really appealed to me. The funny thing is now I'm actually considered a very disciplined, organized person now, and I'm uh, basically meet my deadlines and stuff like that. And I owe it all to Dave. He
He's rubbed
taught me.
off on you, huh?
Yeah, he taught me. Yeah. So, but yeah, so somewhere along the line, the French, it was basically started in friendship, and that's how I kind of knew it was good because I did not want to get involved romantically. I didn't like, oh, he's so good looking. I have to fall in love with him. And I was like,
Right.
no, I was like, this is and I remember having a thought in my head fairly early on. It's like, this is not a guy just, you know, you know, have fun with, go out on a couple dates, and no, you're not the one. And like, and I kind of had the sense like if I go out with him, I will probably marry him. It was a weird thought for me at that point because,
Wow.
it was the phase of my life where you go through boyfriends every few months. So for me to have that thought was like, wow, that's kind of scary. But he was a sort of person, he'd only had like two girlfriends, and he's a good looking guy. So like, but he was all about long-term relationships, and he was a little more serious about life than I was at that age. So, but yeah, he was, yeah, he's obviously 35 years later,
Aw,
still obviously a man of integrity, a man of his word,
I
man of
love
faith,
that.
and funny, makes me laugh. So all that good stuff.
Do you see yourself pulling from his qualities as you write your characters?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's and partly because, and I think I'm really drawn to. I don't want to sound judgmental, but I feel I was led astray by a lot of the books that I read, the romantic books that I read growing up, that basically love was about if you're beautiful enough, you're going to find somebody.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I was not a cute looking girl. I had buck teeth and I had freckles, and I'm pale, and I grew up in Southern California in the 80s when you had to be tan. I did not look like Farrah Fawcett. So, love was not going to come my way. Um, but also these unrealistic ideas of what men were supposed to be like. And they were spouting poetry, and they were always complimenting the woman and telling her how beautiful she was, because
Hmm.
of course she was beautiful. And so it, created these unrealistic expectations.
Yes.
And one of the reasons I got into that bad relationship was because he did those things. He was so flattering. And like,
Ah,
for somebody who didn't see herself as attractive, like, oh, I'm getting flattered. This must be real love. And so it was very, and then I don't think Dave has flattered me more than like three times in our marriage. He's not a man of words. He
Aw,
shows me his love and his actions, and in his presence. Um, but I think romantic fiction can set up some false expectations,
absolutely.
often by drawing pictures of men that aren't male.
So true.
They're not like any real guys that are out there. Real guys smell and scratch themselves and think that bodily fluids are hysterical, and try. I raise sons, so it's like, well,
Yes.
you guys are different creatures. You're just different.
Yes.
Um, and I wanted, and so partly because I started writing when my boys were school age, and so the sense of like seeing who they were and what, oh, amazing young men they are. And now that they're grown up, like they're amazing young men, but would women find them romantic? And I want women to look at solid guys of integrity and like,
Yes.
that is the kind of guy I want forever. Because yeah, the brooding qualities and the six pack abs and the poetry, I mean, that doesn't get you through life, but
No.
integrity does, a solid character. And it's often the quiet ones, yeah, my oldest son, he's very happily married now, but he was a quiet one. He barely dated, and he's drop dead gorgeous, and couldn't get dates because he wasn't a bad boy. And and I kept thinking, some girl is going to realize that he's a gem and she's going to have herself the best husband ever. And that's exactly what happened.
Aw.
And he is so madly in love with his wife, and he treats her like this precious jewel, which she is. I adore my daughter-in-law. Um, but his love, because he's got this quiet, loyal heart, and he he treats her
Mm,
so well. It's like, and like that's the kind of guy that I want to elevate in my own writing. I have extroverted
yes.
heroes. I've had a Flibberty Gibbet who found his way. So I mean, I want to make sure I'm not writing just one guy. And I think
Yes.
that can be an issue too. I do have certain types that I do get. I often have engineers, partly because I'm the daughter of an engineer and I raised an engineer. So I see there's something about that personality that I just love. And so and the hero of my next book is an engineer. So there's just something about that
Yes.
kind. So those keep popping up, but there's certain types. But but I just really want to point young women, especially, to realistic men that may not do what they do in a Hallmark movie, and they probably don't. They probably say stupid things at times. Lachlan is really good at that. He's always saying something that Scylla's like, "Well, you should." Very nice. So he's always saying, just saying things, and she's like, "Well, it's a horrible thing to say." So she calls him out on it. But he's not what most people would consider romantic. But he is swoony in his own way because he's once again one of these rock solid guys that if he's in your court, he's in your court for life, and he will die to protect you. He will definitely do that. So that's just you know, I like to
Yeah.
elevate those kinds of guys.
I think it's so important that we do break some of those myths that have been set before us for so long, as far back as fairy tales go. And as Christian authors, especially, I think we have a bit more of a responsibility to help women see that romance can look a lot different than the things that we've been taught. When I first got married, I remember telling a friend of mine, my husband will just he never buys me flowers, and I've hinted and I've hinted, and then he's gotten mad that I hinted, and he won't bring me flowers. And she said, well, doesn't he do this for you? And, well, yeah. And doesn't he do that for you? Well, yeah. Didn't you tell me one time he did this? And I said, yeah. She goes, those are your flowers. And I needed
Exactly.
that reminder that
Yes.
yes, romance doesn't have to look the way it does in the movies or in those old books. And I love it's one thing I love about Christian fiction is that we see the flawed characters and we see the different ways love can be expressed, not just flowers and not just words of flattery.
And honestly, one of the most romantic things my husband's ever done for me. I was flying home for a conference and I was flying into Oakland Airport. And I'm a very independent person. I have no trouble walking alone at night. I know all the safety things. I mean, I went to UCLA, so you're watching, your eyes are going, you got your keys in your hands with the things pointing
Yep.
between your fingers, so you got something to punch them with, and you keep a wide berth from cars, you keep a wide berth from people. So I know what to do. And I know Oakland sounds scary, but the airport is very safe. And so my flight came in and it was delayed and delayed and landed like, oh, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night. And I'm parked at the airport and come down and there's a little elevator that takes you down or escalator that takes you down into the baggage claim area. And I take the escalator down into the baggage claim area and I see a man standing there like, he kind of looks like Dave. I'm like, yeah. And then he comes up to me like, Dave, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I came to walk you to your car. I was like, I
Oh.
mean, we're talking an hour drive from our home to the Oakland airport. So now we have two cars in Oakland. So he drove all the way to Oakland Airport because he wanted to make sure I had a safe walk to my car, even though I knew I was in no danger. There were enough
Oh.
people around, but not too, it's like
Yeah,
I felt completely safe. But and
that is the
he just walked me to the
sweetest.
car and got in the car and drove home. There
Oh,
was no poetry. There was no,
right.
you're the most beautiful woman in the world. My life rotates around you. None of that. It's just like, I have to walk you to the car. It's like, he didn't
Oh.
have to do that. And he hates driving. The other thing is, he hates driving at night. Hates driving at
Mm.
night. And he hates freeways. So he did both of those things just to walk me to my car. It's like,
It's terribly romantic.
it is. And so I
Good
remind
job,
myself,
Dave. Good job.
yes. And so every time he does something that annoys me, it's like, yeah, but he's the kind of guy that does this. So,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, what would you say to the listener who longs for that kind of love, but is afraid that they've missed their chance or that their past maybe disqualifies them from ever having that kind of love?
Well, first of all, I think in the Christian world, we discount singleness too much.
Mhm.
And I'm saying this as a romance writer where all my characters eventually find their happy ending. And I feel a little
Yes.
guilty about that. I kind of want to write a book where the woman's like, you know what, I'm okay by myself. But it's not my genre. So I can't write that. But so first of all, like there is a freedom in singleness to do what God wants you to do. Um, that's easy for the married woman to say. It's really easy for the married woman to say. Um, but for the woman who is seeking and really would like to find love, I first of all look in the unexpected places. Look at that guy who maybe isn't the best looking, maybe doesn't have the six pack, and honestly, look at the mirrors, honey. I think a lot of women are like, and I'm kind of an average person, like, but he's got to look like Cary Grant, like,
Right,
no, no, no.
right.
So yeah, exactly. So, but also just like, look at those guys, um, maybe the quieter ones, maybe look for the things, look for character, um, friendship. Start with friendship. Just I can't discount friendship enough because you're getting to know the person as a person, not as a potential, as a conquest that you're you're aiming
Right.
for. So you're just getting to know them as human beings. So and getting involved and getting out in the world to meet people. So whether it's getting very involved in church, more and more men are going back to church, ladies. It's a good
Yes,
thing.
yes. That's a good
But
point
also,
too. You're not going to
yeah,
find a good Christian man at the bar. So don't go looking at the bar.
you don't, yeah, it's not worth it. Yeah. But, just volunteering in the community, in especially activities that attract both men and women. And
Mhm.
and getting out there on the job, whatever, not being afraid to meet people, but looking beneath the surface. And that quiet guy sitting next to you at work every day, who just is always there doing his job, working hard. And
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's always hope. If God has someone in mind for you, you can
he will.
always cling to that hope that he will reveal that person to you in his timing.
Oh yeah. And honestly, places like online dating used to be like scary, but so both my son and my daughter met the loves of their lives on Match.com, something like that.
I did
And yeah,
too.
it's so I'm seriously, and I'm my youngest son is yeah, he isn't dating right now, and he's interested. Like, yeah, don't discount it. Don't discount it because for one thing, you get all those filters, so you can get rid of the creeps that you'd be
Right.
meeting at the bar. So like, I just want a Christian. Thank you. And so you can filter out all that stuff and find the things that really matter. And the color of the eyes doesn't matter. How tall they
No,
are doesn't matter.
no.
Weight doesn't matter.
That's going to
Character
change many
matters.
times over the
Oh
years.
yeah, exactly. The eye color probably not, but the weight definitely. Color changes.
Yes. Well, Sarah,
So
what's
yeah.
coming next in your writing world? And will we see more stories connected to Midnight in the Scottish Shore?
Well, the third book, it's not a series, but they are loosely this Embers in the London Sky, Midnight on Scottish Shore, and the third book are loosely connected. They're three cousins. So
Okay.
the next book is Gerrit van der Zee's story, and he is in the Dutch Resistance, and he gets recruited into join. He's a civil engineer, so he builds things, and he gets recruited by his friend, who's much more daring than he is. They're both in the resistance to work with Germany's organization Todt, which built all the military facilities.
Hmm.
And the idea being is that they would be on the inside, they could get the plans and sneak them out to the Allies. Well, they thought they were going to be in France and they get put on a boat, taken to the island of Jersey, and they are trapped there. They cannot get their plans off the island. And so they end up recruiting, we're actually going to get recruited by a young teenage boy. Charlie Picot is one of my favorite characters. He was so much fun. Um, but Charlie's sister is the heroine, Dr. Ivy Picot. So she's a physician, and she is taking care of Germany's slave workers who work with Organization Todt. And most of them are from Russia and the Ukraine, and they escape from the Germans. And there was a ring of doctors, and this was real. There's a ring of doctors who was caring for these men in hiding. And so she gets involved in that. So she does not think much of Organization Todt. They're destroying her beautiful island, pouring concrete all over it. And then she meets Garrett, and he's wearing the German uniform and the uniform of Organization Todt. So she wants nothing to do with him. So see what happens there.
Interesting. Interesting. We can't wait to see what happens in that story as well. Sarah, where can our readers and listeners learn more about you?
My website is sarahsundin.com, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And so find me, say hello.
Perfect. Thank you so much for talking with me today, for sharing your own love story, and just for reminding us of the hope that comes and the freedom that comes in Christ. It was so good talking with you today.